but thanks for joining the call today. My name's Shane Foley. My associate Alex Carillo and I are looking forward to speaking with you today. We understand that this is, a 3-day type of presentation where you're getting information from different advisors. And I am a former, I graduated in 1991, so I've been out of school for quite a long time, and was a former quarterback on the football team from 1986 to 1990. So anyway, still very involved at USC, love mentoring. And without further ado, why don't we kind of climb into the topic that we've got. So as we talked about, so USC Financial Literacy Conference, Alex and Shane, what we really want to talk about today, we're with Capstone Partners, and we're a regional firm within the MassMutual family. But what we want to talk a little bit about today is really looking toward financial independence, identifying priorities in the planning process, budgeting, the significance of having a budget, implementing a savings plan, and then Alex is going to touch and get into more depth on student loans, which I know is going to be applicable for many of us probably on the call. So what is financial independence? Really, we look at it to have complete responsibility for your living expenses. And those living expenses, either now or in the future, can be housing, transportation, groceries, utilities, debts, insurance in the future as you have families and as things get more complex in your lives. Able to support your desired lifestyle, including hobbies, entertainment, social, fitness, although obviously not a lot of people can get to the gyms these days, but travel, charity, accessories, all of those types of things pertain to lifestyle. And really creating a situation where you're going to be more prepared for the future or the unexpected. How confident are you in your financial plan and mitigating risk and future uncertainty? And certainly we're in unprecedented times right now, everybody. We recognize that. I've had 3 Zoom calls already today. The majority of our business is being done virtually or electronically. So anyway, we understand that the world is different and appreciate you guys taking some time to come in today. So let's talk a little bit about becoming financially independent and the significance of budgeting. So one thing I will say is, when I was in school at USC, quite some time ago, as I've already shared, we didn't really have any classes or actually any presentations in this type of scenario. So it's an honor for us to be able to come in and share some thoughts and ideas with you, because other than learning this from my parents, which they didn't do much with me in this regard, it was really self-taught. So in your 20s, really establishing financial goals and really thinking about starting early. We're going to talk about the significance of getting an early start and how that plays out in future years. Creating a debt management plan, really being responsible from the debt side, and why that is significant for everybody, on the call, to really know and understand the different types of debt and why it's important to manage it properly. Implementing a savings plan, again, starting earlier, the better off you're going to be, and certainly will appreciate it later in life. Protecting against setbacks or future uncertainty, and identify and avoid potential pitfalls. As you get into your 30s, you really start, oftentimes as a society, start buying homes, starting families, and just creating situations where there's more to protect. So taking a look at putting a plan together in that, from that standpoint, being closer to paying off student debt and being debt-free, building assets in different asset classes, which we'll touch on a little bit, have stabilized finances, and then just, again, avoiding financial pitfalls at any age. That's key to be able to do that. And again, the presentation today, just take a quick step back, is Alex and I are going to talk for probably the first 30 to 40 minutes. And then certainly at the end, we want this to be interactive, and anybody that has any questions, we want to open it up, at that point. So identifying priorities, what does this mean? Determine what's most important and prioritize your goals. And then obviously goals and plans adjust and change over time. So what that means is, being able to, reset those goals over time as our needs and goals change over time. Value of time, giving yourself plenty of time to save, We touched on that. We'll touch on it more specifically. Understanding your career income potential. And Alex, who's got out of school in 2011, really talked a little bit about that. He, touched on that when we were talking earlier, just why that is so significant, because certain career trajectories are going to be paid a lot more early on, situations where you're going into private equity, analyst types of roles, where people are being compensated early. And then there's other careers where it's really more delayed gratification, where you're starting in an entrance level or in more of an entrepreneur type of capacity. And that might pay off down the road. And so thinking about that early on while you're still in school and thinking about the trajectories and what that looks like. And then revisiting your priorities, considering creating a personal mission statement. And I think this is important really just as an alumni, as you're out networking and meeting people, really understand what your goals are, which industries you want to pursue, and having a personal statement that really supports that. The other thought is really focusing on the why and not just the what. I know this isn't just specific to financial planning, but really, again, I think it's important to have a plan, and not just what we're doing, but the why behind it, right? Are we saving today and making sacrifices today so that we're going to be in a better position in our 30s, in our 40s, later years toward retirement? All of those types of things are really important to be thinking about, not just what we're doing, but having a plan and having a why behind it. So just taking a look at budgeting for today's families. When you're taking a look at a sample, what that looks like as our situations grow and become a little bit more complex, you've got current expenses. Okay, what does that mean? Paying monthly bills, your mortgage or rent, cell phones, clothes, streaming services, managing debt, different types of debt with credit cards, car payments, college, student loans, protecting family and possessions, and why insurance becomes very significant in that, protecting your income and protecting your future and your family, covering medical expenses, contributing to religious obligations and beliefs, donating philanthropic causes, and then really longer term aspirations and goals, purchasing a new or upgrading your home, funding retirement accounts inside of a 401k or a SEP IRA or an individual retirement account, and calculating how much is needed. I think that's something that's really important. A lot of us, and I've been in the financial world in the capital markets for over 25 years, but a lot of people go through life just continuing to, invest in a 401k, which is great, but they don't really take the time to take a step back and analyze how those assets are working for them, how they're basically putting a plan in place that may adjust over time, where they may be overweighted in some areas of their lives and underweighted in others. And that's something obviously we can talk more specifically about here, but outliving your savings today, people are living longer than they have ever. But at the same time, people aren't necessarily as healthy, with situations, not even taking into account the coronavirus and the current pandemic that we're dealing with right now, but just dealing with dementia and things of that nature. I mean, those are things that we help a lot of clients try to help mitigate some of those risks of uncertainty in the future. And then covering rising costs of medical expenses, caring for elderly parents. I just talked a little bit about that with dementia and some of the other debilitating things out there, and not wanting to burden our children. So how do we, go about putting a plan in place that allocates for doing that? And then providing for your family's goals and gifting philanthropically. So the next slide, really just in this situation, we're taking an example of somebody that's making 100,000 gross annually. So roughly 8,300 pre-tax, and then after tax in a 25% tax bracket is what we used, having 6,250 net to apply to your monthly expenses. In this simple pie chart that we've got with different colors, you can see our lives become more complicated. Mortgage and homeowners insurance, the property taxes, utilities, college loans, credit cards, auto expenses, groceries, all of these types of costs that come into play, healthcare, other insurance, miscellaneous, and the 401k, contributions that go out on a pre-tax basis. And then, the last one is savings. And so that 6,250 that you had to allocate, really at the end of it, when it's netted out of all your other spending, to get a discretionary basis, the money that's left over to put toward future goals and future planning. In this scenario, it's $400. And so it really goes to show you, all of us, that there's a lot of other costs that really affect what we're able to net out at the end of the day. So creating a budget, and the important components really should include having a personal financial statement, really with your assets and your liabilities, but also getting into your operating, your expenses, your net income that we talked about, fixed expenses, and what that looks like. Do you have installment loans such as car payments, that type of thing? And then do you have, just your variable cost of living expenses with, bills that are applying to living in a house or an apartment, variable expenses, and certainly trying to get to a point where we understand discretionary spending. Okay, saving goals, really the significance of paying yourself first and why that makes a lot of sense. It's a discipline. It's not always easy, but get into a situation on a long-term basis, which is what's done inside of a 401k. But if you don't have the luxury of having a 401k, being able to allocate either on an auto basis, automatic billing basis, putting that into a savings account and a vehicle that's going to help you build for your future. And then different types of budgeting, simple or more complex. You can do this by paper. It can be written out goals. We have clients that like to utilize paper in doing that, but certainly electronic versions with different systems, basic is Excel, e-money, different things like that we work with clients with. And then monitoring or adjusting at regular intervals, being able to take a look and looking at those goals. Don't just set it and forget it. At the very least, you want to look at them annually, but having something that you're striving for and being able to have that available so that you're looking at it, seeing it, visualizing it, and understanding it. Discretionary spending may differ from one family to the next, but the most important factor of a successful budget are prioritization and maintenance, and consistency as well. So the next graph really shows you the significance or the importance of saving. Okay, this example, it annualizes a 6.5% annual return. And on the bottom of the graph, you see age 20, 25, 30, 35, all the way to age 60. But this is how much you would need to save on a monthly basis at 6.5% annualized to have $1 million in retirement. Okay, at 20 years old, if you're putting $310 a month, assuming a 6.5% return, you're going to have $1 million by the time you're going to retire. If you start at 60, and you're going to retire at 65, you're going to have to put away a significant amount of money monthly to be able to catch up. So it really just goes to show you that the value of compound interest in starting early and why that really makes a big, significant difference over time. So on the savings plan, what does that mean? It's a strategic process that allows you to make measurable, sustainable, and consistent progress towards your financial goals. We just showed you the power of compound growth by starting early, automating savings. I touched briefly on that, but for example, putting 10% of your monthly income into a savings account and paying yourself first. Again, it's a discipline. Emergency fund, one of the building blocks of financial planning is really having enough saved or put away for a rainy day. Obviously we're in a situation right now where we have a number of people that we know that unfortunately are part of temporary job cuts, or having to really cut back. And without having really some savings or some money put away to help them, it's a really tough situation. Obviously, government checks are coming for people in certain situations that with income caps. But again, having a plan and having money put aside and saved is going to be a really important piece to any financial plan. And then enrolling in retirement accounts. taking advantage of a match and tax deferred growth. 401k plans, and again, don't want to get too deep into the weeds with this because this is really just conceptually, ideas and thoughts around this. But having an employer that puts together a 401k plan, it really makes a lot of sense, especially if they're matching, to put that money away on a pre-tax basis. What that means is that money that goes into that 401k is going to be tax deferred. It's going to lower clients' adjustable gross income, reportable income today, and it will grow tax deferred. It is taxable at distribution, but people that are investing for, from age 25 to 65 for 40 years, that 401k can be a very substantial part of what life looks like for them in retirement. And then learning how to invest, having a purpose for every dollar, short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, and really knowing and differentiating, what different buckets and strategies are done for. Okay, people might be putting money away for saving for a home when they're in their 20s. They may be, putting together college funding for their kids through a 529 plan, different vehicles like that, cost of insurance, and why that makes sense to be able to protect your family and your income. So let's take a look at a sample savings plan right here. And in this scenario, this was a real world example. In this situation, the client is making $180,000 annually. He gets a $10,000 bonus on an annual basis. In the top column, he's putting together $215 on a monthly basis for term insurance and for disability. His estimated living expenses are $5,000, and then his estimated taxes, I think it's about a 28% tax bracket. He's going to have $4,793 left over at the end of the month. And if you annualize that, it's about $65,000, $64,500. So in this situation, the recommendations in a scenario like this is having a shorter liquid goal of cash and checking account where you're putting away about $670 on a monthly basis. And again, that's going to help fund your emergency account where you've got 3 to 6 months of savings, for a rainy day or for an unexpected situation. And then a managed investment account. So this is something that's outside of the 401k, but also putting together additional retirement dollars, long-term, dollars to help somebody later on in their retirement years. And then cash value life insurance. That is an annualized premium you see over there at $12,000 a year. And that is another goal or strategy to fund an after-tax strategy, whereas the 401k is a pre-tax strategy. When you fund on an after-tax basis, that money is going to grow tax-free. And there's some advantages, obviously, with protecting your family or future family, but also being able to access dollars on a tax-free basis, similar to a Roth IRA. And we certainly can talk about that in more detail or answer any questions there. But then your retirement plan contributions, again, he's funding the maximum at his age. This client's under 50 years old, so he's putting $19,500 or maxing that out. And if you're over 50, you can put away $26,000 on an annual basis to catch up. But it just goes to show you in this situation where somebody's implementing a plan very strategically, you can see the percentages on the right-hand side, 5%, to cash, 46 to the managed account, about 20% to the cash value life insurance plan, and 30% annualized to the retirement plan contributions. So the budget summary, really assessing your income. Don't forget to consider all income sources. So this means if you've got primary income, certainly that W-2 type of paycheck or W-2 job, but are there other income sources? Do you have other private investments? Is there real estate? Things of that in the future that you're able to create multiple revenue streams. And that's something that's very, very important, I think, from if you can create that and put that together, creating multiple revenue streams is going to help hedge against risk, hedge against volatility, and put a sound plan in place. Track your spending. So having a 30-day tracking or 3-month look back, being consistent with that. knowing how much you're spending and budgeting for it, taking a look at it. Again, understanding your expenses, fixed versus variable costs. We're in a very low interest rate environment right now with rates being at all-time lows, specifically for this current pandemic that we're in. But what that means is the cost of capital, the cost of borrowing is very attractive right now. But if you have variable debt that's going to adjust and go up over time, that means that can be a little bit risky, right? Certainly if somebody has variable debt that is going to adjust back up over time, then if they're already over leveraged, that can certainly create some serious challenges. Categorizing your expenses, and there's a basic financial planning 101, but a 50-30-20 rule, 50% going toward cost of living, 30% for wants, and 20% for debt. That is just one sample on that. Although the next point talks about it, really preparing for the unexpected and prioritizing expenses and getting money from your lowest priority. Really what it means is knowing bad debt, knowing credit card debt that's double-digit debt, 20, we see certain clients that have 18, 20, 22% credit card debt, and they're not paying their debt off on a monthly basis. The cost of that capital becomes 4 or 5 times more costly than what they were borrowing at initially by not paying it off. So really having a discipline of applying that and being very specific with prioritizing debt. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but just common money mistakes. These slides are going to be available for you afterwards, but I just wanted to highlight some just basic points here. Number one, spending more than you make. Certainly, that is at its core a very essential piece. Spending more than you make is certainly a mistake that is going to create major problems in borrowing and getting into a not a very positive situation. Misjudging big expenses. So, buying a new car, but not really taking into account what the insurance is going to be on that car. Same thing with buying a home. Somebody buys real estate, the cost of property taxes in California is a big number. Too many never-ending payments, number 6. Just different streaming services, Netflix, all of those types of things, 1 or 2, but when you start adding up 10 to 12 of those apps and different things like that, it can become very costly and you're not even aware of it. I talked a little bit about interest rates prior, but number 12, being on the wrong side of interest rates, especially if you've got variable, interest rates. Again, right now, the cost of capital and borrowing is very attractive, but as rates rise over the years, being in a variable loan can create some undue risk. Not having a budget. We've talked a lot about, really the significance of having a budget, knowing how much you're spending, knowing how much you're netting, knowing how much is available for you to put away for your future, for retirement, for, again, in the shorter term, maybe for buying a home or an investment property. And then, 17, we talked about not having an emergency fund and why that can create so much trouble and challenge for people that don't have a nest egg built up for a rainy day. Again, I'm not going to read all of these, but going down to 14. So emotions of investing, thought it was appropriate to really talk a little bit about, not only having a budget, but really not trying to time markets. If you're in your 20s, which I think most of you are on the call, having a long-term plan in place and really sticking to it. If you're trying to time the market and you end up, buying at the high or buying, and trying to time it and missing the market by buying low, it's just a situation where, there's going to be peaks and valleys. But if you're committed to markets over long periods of time, we can look back historically. In the next slide, I'm going to share with you why it's so significant to stay invested, on a longer term basis. Again, going back to having a budget, knowing where you need to have money available that's going to be dedicated to shorter term purchases, shorter term acquisitions. Obviously you don't want to take a lot of risk in a situation like that. But if you've got a 40 or 30, 25, 30, 35-year time horizon, the real significance of having a long-term plan in place that's going to have gains over time. This slide and graph right here shows you specifically why staying the course really makes sense. This is a dollar example of a dollar by being invested in the S&P 500. And the timeline really takes you back in April, at the bottom of the screen, April 40th. That $1 is going to, it's going to keep going up. So you had a correction in 1973, but right after that, the money would keep going up, right? Black Monday, which the market in 1987 dropped 22% in one day. It was the most unprecedented event at that time, but staying invested basically shows you, why it made sense to stay, invested after that. The tech bubble crash in the late, 1999, 2001 timeframe took a pretty significant dip, but bounced back again. The global financial crisis, the Great Recession in 2008, took a dip, but then came back. And then obviously now we were in the longest bull market run in our country's history prior to this pandemic that we got hit with, that we're dealing with, unprecedented time right now. But again, markets have stabilized. And even though we're anticipating some volatility, it is going to be make a lot of sense to continue to stay invested over the long term. So with that, I'm going to let Alex jump in and take over here on the student loans.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. Thanks for that overview of budgeting and personal finance. And just as Shane said, we're excited to be here, excited to be teaching some of these topics that we were never educated on growing up. As Shane mentioned, I graduated in 2011 from SC. And this is stuff that I was never exposed to, even at that time. I was economics major, and so most of the stuff that we learned was similar to what we learned in class, very high level, none of the personal finance stuff. So part of the reason I got into this industry was to be able to do things like this and give back and educate. So really excited to be here. So all that said, let's jump on to the next topic, student loans. For those of you still in school after this year, the most important thing you can do is obvious: limit the amount of total loans you take. And if you do need to take any additional loans, try to make them federal. Those have the best flexibility in the short term and long term. But if you do need to go into the private lending area, that is something that many of us have done. It's not the worst thing in the world, but just realize private lenders are aggressive in financing college education, but oftentimes they're going to do it to stack the deal in their favor. Very little wiggle room for the borrowers. But like I said, at some point, if you need the money, you need the money, and you kind of have to figure it out later. So part of that process figuring out later is being on a call like this today. And the first step for anyone is to really take an inventory of the total amount of loans that they have. So how many student loans do I have? How much do I owe in total? Who are these loans with? Are they private? Are they federal? Do I have a combination of the both? And then if they are private or federal, what are those rates like? Shane mentioned some of the differences of having a fixed rate where it's predictable, something you can plan around, which is beneficial for those starting off and planning to have that cost be a fixed cost versus variable, where it can go and be hundreds of dollars difference on a monthly basis, is troublesome. So are your loans private, federal? Are they fixed or variable? And then if I have federal loans, are they subsidized or unsubsidized? Unsubsidized loans are those that continue to charge interest while you're in school. And once finished, that interest was added to the original amount. So it increases the total amount of the loan from what you originally borrowed. So to give you a quick example, if you take out a $10,000 unsubsidized loan your freshman year, that's at a 5% interest rate, I'm assuming a simple interest rate, that would be $500 a year. So over 4 years, $2,000. An unsubsidized loan will add that $2,000 to the original 10. And so when you finish your 4 years, your loan balance is now $12,000. So if you have unsubsidized loans and you're looking at your balance, be aware that in the future it's going to be a higher number because they're going to add that interest on it at the very end. And like I said, don't overlook any outstanding loans. If you went through USC, the financial aid office should have a record of each loan they distributed. If you got any private ones off the grid, you're You're gonna have to check your credit report to see anything you might have taken off there. All your federal loans will be listed on the National Student Loan Data System, nslds.com. You can go there and get a report of all your federal loans, and it has the rates, it has if they're direct, non-direct, and more information that you can load onto different websites. So I would encourage everybody to go to the National Student Loan Data Systems to check all your federal loans, check your credit report to find out all your private loans, and then follow up with financial aid office to see if there's anything outstanding, because you don't want to have any lingering out there. Okay, Shane, can you go to the next slide? And there are two primary types of student loans. There's the federal loans and the private loans. It's important to understand the major differences. Federal loans are offered by the federal government, which really gives them flexibility as being a part of the federal program. So when you hear student loan forgiveness as a political issue, what they're mostly talking about is the federal loans, because those are the ones that the government can affect the most. There has been some talk of potentially doing some forgiveness on private loans down the road, but all the conversations you hear politically are mostly talking about the federal ones. But besides, potentially being forgiven in the future, there is some flexibility that the federal loans offer you now compared to the private loans. The biggest one, I think, is a 6-month grace period after graduation. Some private lenders will have something similar to that, but all federal loans, the moment you graduate, you have 6 months of not having to worry about them. It's a great benefit to anyone starting off. And if the note on the bottom in 2020, actually all the federal system has suspended all loans. So all loans right now are 0% interest loans. So if you graduate in December, you'll actually have until September of that 0%. And anybody else that's already graduated and has any federal loans, your loans are currently at 0% interest. You can choose to pay those back if you want to and pay them down faster, or if you've been affected by the times, you can just take this other time to not make any payments on them. But I would encourage you to log in, check it, make sure your interest rate, they should already be at 0% if you have any of those. So again, federal loans have more flexibility in that sense, 6-month grace period. They also offer either deferment or forbearance if you can't make your payments. Deferment you have to qualify for, means you're either still in school or unemployed, active military, active Peace Corps. And if you're in deferment, it's similar to having a subsidized loans where the interest does not tack on the back end. Versus forbearance, anyone can apply for forbearance at any time up to 3 years. If you have any federal loans, your loans will be suspended, but all that interest will continue to accrue and be tacked on, similar to an unsubsidized. So it's a way to give you flexibility, but it is going to increase those balances on the loans. Federal loans also have income-driven repayment plans. It can look at your discretionary income, do a percentage of that to pay those back versus just whatever the loan balance is, which is what private lenders do. They look at the loan balance and the rate and give you a term, and that's what your monthly payment will be based off of. Federal loans have some flexibility on the monthly benefit or the monthly payments. Possible forgiveness, like we spoke about, but even on the income-driven repayment plans, and I'll get into the possible forgiveness later. And then also federal loans do not transfer to beneficiaries. If you pass away, your federal loans pass with you. Private loans, generally those lenders will go after your estate. What is the reason of private loans? They do have a big use, not only for what you guys do, but what we do as planners. It's easier to qualify for private loans. They have higher loan limits. And then the one that we most care about is if you're looking to do a refinance of your loans, where you're looking to get a more attractive interest rate, you're gonna have to go out into the private lenders and shop it around, shop your credit rate around. And that's what private lenders are meant to do. So if we go to the next slide, what is refinancing? So refinancing is using private lenders in an effort to lower interest rates, whether that's going from the federal program to the private world, or going from a private to another private loan. Sometimes, I know in this current rate environment, we have some clients that for even their home mortgages are looking to do refinances because rates are so low. So they're going to take their private bank mortgage, look for another lender that can give them a better rate, and just swap it over from one loan to another. When you're refinancing, the lender is literally writing a check to pay off your loans, and then they're starting a new agreement with you as the borrower. So anything that you've done with the previous offices is gone. Any repayment plans is over with. So keep that in mind when doing any refinances. And how does that differ from consolidating? When we're talking about consolidating, we're looking more at the federal program. Consolidating is taking all your federal loans and combining them into one direct loan at an average blended interest rate. Think of it as more of a cosmetic change where if you have 5 or 6 different loans you've accrued while at USC, or if you came from any other places, they're all federal, they're all considered the same from the federal government. You can combine them all into one big loan, all on one website, and have one monthly payment. So it's really beneficial just for organizing and everything we're talking about, budgeting, financial planning, just keeping yourself organized. If you're going to consolidate your loans, make sure that you're not on any repayment plans yet, or if you're on any income-driven repayment plans, the consolidation will restart all of those clocks on those repayment plans. When we're talking about repaying loans, what is the number one factor? It's going to be your income. And as Shane said, some people, if you're like an engineer, typically start off with a higher income as a starting entry level versus someone in different fields as an entrepreneur. Might have a lower balance, or someone that's commission only might have a lower salary, no salary guaranteed. So what they're going to want to do if you don't have a high income early on is protect your cash flow. You're not going to want a lot of your money to be going towards paying off your debt because you need it to live. So early on, if you can jump on, if your income is low, think of an income-driven repayment type of plan to maximize your cash flow. But if you're in a career that's giving you a substantial amount of earnings where you're actually able to maybe even pay more than your minimum payments, or you're not having any trouble paying your student loans, you might want to look at a refi in that case, because you can go out, like I said, to the private lender world. They'll look at your specific credit, your job, and they'll give you probably a lower rate than what the federal can give just as a sweeping rate across the country. So if you're early on coming out and you're going to be able to pay down student loans, I would potentially look at a refi versus staying on one of these programs and paying higher interest rates. If you decide, okay, I want to keep my federal loans, I don't want to go into the private world, I like having that flexibility, what are my options to just pay it back without any income-driven plans, without looking for any forgiveness? I just want to pay my loans back. What are my options? You have 3. You have the standard plan, the graduated plan, and the extended plan. The standard plan is automatic for anybody after the 6-month grace period. It takes all your loans, all your interest, divides it over 10 years, and gives you a monthly payment to finish your loans in 10 years. It's going to be the highest monthly cost of all the options because it is just trying to finish it off as fast as you can. Graduated is similar. It looks at your total loan balance. Depending on that, it could be more than a 10-year rate or 10-year term, I should say. But every 2 years, it's going to increase. So if you're planning on your income to increase quickly, this might be good for you. But I know some clients that they started the graduated program and the income doesn't keep up with the level that they thought. And every 2 years, it keeps going up, and they're not able to do it, and they have to switch over another plan. Extended is kind of like standard, but taking that same principle over 25 years. You have to have at least $30,000 of debt to do it. But think about spreading your debt over 25 years. If some of you are 20, that's going to take you all the way to 45. Do you want to have your loans lingering that long? That's a lot of delayed interest that you're going to have to be paying. So keep all those in mind when deciding one of those 3. Now, if you say, I can't make those monthly payments, I want my income to be considered, what are my options? That's when you go to the next slide, income-driven repayment plans. And I think this is kind of the reason why we're all here today. This is what everybody wants to know, and it is the most confusing. So if you're at a point where you're even thinking of an income-driven repayment plan, that means that you've already gone through the process of considering either a refi and you chose not to do it. You maybe have already done your consolidation and you have everything on one platform. You know all your private loans and you have those either refied or you have those managed, you have a plan for those. And now you're just looking at your federal loans. What is the best way to pay those back using my income and not wanting to pay a high monthly amount? There's 4 options to do it. So like I said, after you've done all your due diligence, now you know you want to keep your federal loans and pay them back on a plan. I have 4 options: repay, pay, IBR, and ICR. The 4 of them, they're all pretty similar in that they take a percentage of your discretionary income, which you can see listed on the middle column there. And they give you a term to pay it off in. So if you look at the repay, it's going to take 10% of your discretionary income over an annual basis. That'll be your monthly payment. And it's going to assume you're going to make those payments for either 20 or 25 years, depending if you're undergrad or grad. If you do it for 20 years, at the end of the 20 years, whatever balance you have remaining, and this is true of the 4 of the plans, whatever balance you have remaining will be forgiven. but that forgiveness is taxable. So quick example, you have 60,000 worth of loans, you go into the repay, you pay back 50,000 of that principal over 20 years, you have 10,000 left, that 10,000 gets forgiven. In that year that it gets forgiven, that 10,000 gets added to your AGI, your adjusted gross income, as if you had taken that income. So you have to pay income taxes on that amount. If the balances are substantially high, I've seen up to $100,000 of that, it can greatly affect your taxes. So something that you're going to want to plan for. I mean, the good thing with these is you have 20 to 25 years to do it. So hopefully you are doing that planning early on. And I don't want to make too many general blanket statements over which of these is best, except for the fact that the income contingent repayment is only really used if you have a parent plus loan you want to consider. Just the numbers don't make sense. 20% of discretionary income over 25 years. For something like that, you're probably better off going on to the private market for looking for a lower interest rate at that 20% amount. So that's the only thing I'll say blanket statements. Otherwise, you're gonna want to sit with someone and decide which of these three options is best for you, but they're all pretty similar in how they handle it. Now, something totally separate than all of this that we spoke about, if you're gonna go into a career in the nonprofit sector, in the government entity, something that, a teacher, educator, you're gonna go work for the county, anything that's 501c3 tax exempt is the verbiage 501c3. Typically, if the employer pays out, instead of a 401k, they offer a 403b, a different type of retirement plan, those qualify as well. But how the plan works is the Public Student Loans Forgiveness Program forgives the remaining balance of your federal direct loans if you make 120 monthly payments, so that's 10 years, under a qualifying repayment plan. So you need to be under one of the income-driven plans as well. So you need to work for a qualifying employer, working full-time for a qualifying employer. Full-time in this sense is 30 hours a week. And you can't split it up. You could do 15 hours, say you work for a couple nonprofits, 15 at one nonprofit, 15 at another, and that would give you the full-time. And with these, now these are the ones that you might have heard some horror stories about, where only 2 to 3% of people that are applying are getting this forgiveness. And those stats are true, but a lot of the times it's because people aren't in the right qualified employment, or they're not tracking their monthly payments. You do need to track them as well. So it is a little bit of homework that you need to be doing. And then you need to make sure your employer qualifies. So how do you do that? You can send in an employer certification form to the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program, and they'll tell you whether or not your employer is qualified or not. So there are a lot of different factors that go into this one. But at the very end, what happens is it's a tax-free benefit after 10 years of payments. So similar to the example we just gave, if you have a $60,000 loan and you pay back $50,000 over 20 years, well, for this individual, they would make those payments for 10 years. So $60,000 loan, say they pay back $25,000 over 10 years. So that gives them a balance of $35,000. That full $35,000 gets forgiven. It doesn't count as your taxes, doesn't count as anything. But that is because you are working as part of a nonprofit, government entity, something that's giving back to the people. So people that fit in this category are, physicians that are doing great things out there. Sometimes I've seen physicians go on an income-driven repayment plan early on. And then once they have better income later on, then they'll just pay down their loans in full. So there's different options you could do with all these different programs. But yeah, that's public student loan forgiveness, how that works. And finally, points to remember: select the loan repayment plan that's right for you. Obviously, a lot of different factors that go into these. Everything that we just talked about, budget, your income, take all those things into account. You should really sit with a financial professional if you have the chance to. Obviously, Shane and myself are making ourselves available to you guys. Shoot us an email. I can send you different resources, different websites that you can get more information on, or if you want to set up a meeting with us, we can do that as well. Take a long-term view on your finances based on your individual goals and risk tolerance. The plan really has to be suited to you. It can't be what your friends are doing. It can't be what your family thinks you should be doing or should be doing. It really has to be what you want to accomplish short-term and long-term. And start your financial plan early. There is a price for procrastination. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of it where people are having to work longer, having to, instead of retiring at 65, they're working until 70, 75 because they didn't save early enough. They never started early enough. So don't be part of that statistic. Obviously, you're here at this call. Take advantage of the information and put a plan in place. Even if it's just basic, set it up, review your budget and savings plan quarterly, keep up with it. And like I said, seek up professional help whenever you get to that point. But we're here as mentors. We're here as friends. Reach out to us anytime. We're happy to take your calls. Thank you, Fight On. That's Shane.
Yeah.
That's I. Anything else you want to add, Shane?
No, just say thank you guys for your interest and for your time. And, again, Alex talked about it already, but, I love giving back. We hire an intern every summer, and I serve on a couple of boards at USC now. Alex is still very, very involved Trojan. And, it's something that just want to reiterate. We're here for you guys. I didn't get any of this in school. I don't think Alex did either, even as a finance and an econ major. Anyway, we're available, and of course, Fight On. So we're open to ask any questions. We went a little bit over, but I know we have an hour, so Manjari, we have another 10 seconds.
Absolutely. So Shane and Alex, there is a Q&A section or box. Hopefully you have access to that. So we have a lot of questions. So that's something we can always compile if we don't get to all of them. But let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, I do see those. So the first one, Shane, what are some examples of different retirement accounts? I saw that question come in earlier.
Yeah. So, different retirement accounts, and again, it can get pretty specific, but certainly if a company offers a 401k, that is a really great avenue to take advantage of a company match and a company that has put a group retirement plan in place. That certainly is from the group standpoint. You hear about traditional IRAs or an individual retirement account. That's another one that allows people to put money away on a pre-tax basis. You can't put as much away inside of an IRA, an individual retirement account, as you can inside the 401k, but it still is a good way to put some money away on a pre-tax basis. There is a catch-up on that as well, over 50. And then there's a Roth. People mention the name Roth IRA, and that is a way to be able to put money away on a pre-tax, I should say on an after-tax basis. So that money that goes in would be after tax. But the nice thing about it is you can have that money grow tax-free inside of the account. So there's no capital gains or any taxes on that money when it distributes to you later in life. Another strategy that is probably a little bit more of a long-winded response time, but permanent life insurance is another way that people utilize kind of dual purpose. They're able to put protection planning in place for their family or beneficiaries, but also you're funding life insurance on an after-tax basis. And so that is another way that clients that have accumulated a substantial amount of wealth are utilizing that as a retirement vehicle to borrow money on an after-tax or tax-free basis. Obviously, there's a number of other ones, including SEP IRAs, defined benefit plans, things of that nature. But I think for for the extent of this call, I think talking about individual retirement accounts, 401ks, as well as some things outside of the box, which could be a Roth IRA or permanent life insurance. Alex, anything to add?
Yeah, no, that's a good overview, and I'm just reading through the questions. So there's 35 of them, so maybe we'll just fire through some of them real quick.
Yeah.
Is there a budget worksheet that you recommend for students to use? If so, where could we find the worksheet? I'll answer that one. For a budget sheet, we do have a template that we use, and I think the best benefit of our template is it just has a lot of fields listed to give you an idea of what expenses that you're paying that you might not consider. Recurring expenses is a big one, like Netflix. People always forget those, and the Amazons and things like that. But Excel has a good budget sheet. We can certainly forward our template as well, if USC is okay forwarding that. But yeah, Excel has good templates, and we can send other resources. But Excel has really good templates, I would say.
And Manjari, we can forward that budget sheet to you that we use, and if you're comfortable with it, you can forward it out, or people can reach out to us directly. We see that there's 42 questions, and obviously we're not going to have time for all of them, but we do want to let you guys know that we can certainly make ourselves available via phone or a follow-up Zoom call for more specific questions as well.
And one question about investing. Obviously, people are looking to retire this year and withdraw money from their 401ks. They're going to realize some losses. How much time before expected retirement year should we look to minimize risky investments in a 401k? And then at that time, should we be looking at mainly bonds and cash investments within the 401k? So
Yeah, I'll start on that. That's a great question, by the way. I mean, somebody that is, we talked a little bit about in the slides earlier about time horizon for investing, and certainly if somebody has a 401k, but they're within 5 years, say, of retirement, or even 10 years, there would be a recommendation certainly to be more conservative in hedging some of those investments over time with bonds, as you said in the question, is certainly one way to do it. Preferred stock, ETFs, but really, I think bonds and layering some of that in is a good way to hedge against some of the market volatility. The idea behind it is, again, the volatility that we've experienced over the last few weeks now in your 20s as a student is going to give you ample time over the next 40 or 45 years from retirement to recover. And we showed the graph about the importance of staying invested because of what the recovery looks like. But somebody that might be 2 to 3 years or even 5 years isn't really going to be a candidate for taking on the same type of risk because they don't have the same timeline for recovery. And so that's something we work with clients in that regard. All of you listeners that, are in their 20s, and Alex does a great job, with a lot of our younger professionals and in our team. But we work with clients that are 5 years away from retirement or retiring this year or might be on the other side of retirement. So we work with a wide range of clients. Hopefully that answers. I know it might be a little bit shortened, but that was a very good question. Alex, get a couple more in there.
Yeah, going back to the emotions of investing slide, what do you mean in investing? Investing in the stock market or something else?
Do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
If you can take it, I'll read through some of the questions, get you some other ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, the emotions of investing, really, it's a lot about risk tolerance. Okay. And so what does that mean? Risk return. How much risk do you want to take on for the type of return that you're going after? And if you're in the equity markets, meaning stocks, certainly there's riskier stocks, there's growth stocks. We're getting into the weeds a little bit versus value stocks. So, being able to put, a specific risk profile in place, knowing again what that timeline is. Are we investing with a pool of assets for the long term, for retirement dollars, 20, 30, 40 years out? Or is a pool of assets going to be needed to be accessed in the next 3 years? And so again, time horizon and risk appetite, what somebody's risk is, but what the needs are on the timeline for accessing that pool of funds and what is it for, that really ties into it. And then some people really are just more risk averse than others. And, some people are gamblers, some people aren't, and so there's just different risk profiles. And as Alex said in his portion of it, all of this is very personalized. It's not a one size fits all. Everything we do is customized. So when we sit down with a client, obviously their age, their time horizon, their situation, what they have in place, all of that is part of the process for it. And so, but taking the emotions out of it, if you've got a longer time horizon, certainly we looked at the graph that showed why it makes sense to have a pool of money that's invested for the long term and not trying to time the market. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, no, that's well said. And then actually this question, I'm curious actually how you'll answer, Shane. Do you have any advice for seniors who are graduating in a month into this job market where offers are being rescinded and hiring is down, especially since many of us do not qualify for unemployment or the government checks?
Boy, I'll tell you, that's a great question. And, everybody on the call, we're living it too. We've got business owners that we work with right now that are, putting out temporary or in some cases longer term pay cuts and laying people off. And, we're dealing with unemployment numbers that we haven't seen in 100 years, or close to 100 years. So it's very much an unprecedented time. I don't have a quick answer for you on this call, but what I would say is continue developing the network. We're not known as the Trojan family for nothing, and really getting out there, continuing to meet people, reach out to a lot of Trojans, build your base now, build your LinkedIn profiles, find out industries and alternatives, in other areas that are growing. Amazon is at an all-time high. The nature of the retail markets is changing by the day dramatically. That means retail real estate. It means retail retailers, companies in the retail space. And so really kind of knowing and understanding, being well-read and understanding what the new normal is going to look like. But I'd say, going back to that question, really just continue to build your base, build your network, think about industries and markets that are going to be safer during this time. The Johnson & Johnson, the Kimberly-Clark's, consumable types of products, biotech, all of those types of industries. Be well-read and understand, what direction things are going. And then at the same time, really continue to build your network. You never know, even if you reach out to somebody, if they're not in a field that you specifically like, but you see that they're connected to a lot of people in LinkedIn and they're a connector, reach out to them, build your network and say, look, I want to learn more. People like myself and Alex and many, many other Trojan alumni will take the time, as we are today, to talk and try to give back and help people. And this is a time right now, we are all in this together and pulling through together. And that's what, to me, that's what being a Trojan means, is really reaching out and leveraging the Trojan family and really living that. I know we only have probably time for one more question, Manjari. Is that all right? I want to be respectful of time.
Yeah. One or two questions is fine. I've also been copying and pasting the questions into a Word document as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm definitely logging them in case.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we can get some answers out to people afterwards. Maybe a Q&A on an email or something. There was a question as to the Pslf, Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. Why do you need to track your payments? What exactly do you need to track? You need to track your 120 qualifying payments, making sure that they're on time. You need to get those certified annually. There is a form that has to go out. So it's not just a matter of making your payments on time and thinking you're okay. You need to stay on top of it. This is why people are getting rejected, because they're not either staying on top of their payments or they're not making sure that their employer is certified early on, things like that. But it's mostly making sure you're making on-time payments to a qualified, while working for a qualified employer.
Why don't you give us one more, Alex, and then we.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see, there's so many.
Well,
when we meet with the finance professional, are there certain professional designations we should specifically look for?
Well, I mean, finance, when you talk about finance, that's a very broad, it's a very broad subject, right? I mean, there's real estate finance, there's obviously stocks and bonds. I would say in our world, licenses that we have in our world as financial advisors is really a Series 7 and a Series 66, or a 63 and 65. Those are really the key licenses. When you talk about designations, certainly a certified financial planner, a CFP, a CFA are pertinent and applicable to our industry. There's obviously some that are more specific. CHLU specific to insurance and the insurance industry. But I think those are all significant. Certainly an MBA. I got my MBA from Pepperdine in night school. But I think certainly having an MBA gives you very general and specific business knowledge with, how to apply, working with business owners if you're on our side of the equation as advisors, or really just building your own practice and running it like a business, not as an individual. So I think, just in a nutshell, I think those are some specific designations that I think would be valuable and worthwhile, at least in our space. So I think with that being said, Manjari, I'll kick it back over to you. We can all, obviously, if there's interest, we know you're talking to a couple of other great Trojans over the next couple of days who are giving back and trying to help. If it would make sense for us to have another call, in the future, Alex and I would be available and would be happy to do it. If you ever do a panel or something like that in the future, we'd welcome that as well. But just, again, we're, it's not lip service. I mean, we are part of the Trojan family. We love connecting. We love giving back. And if there's more specific questions or thoughts, you guys can reach out to us, email us, add us on LinkedIn, anything you want, just let us know.